The title of my paper is Semiotic Implication. The aim of my paper is to give a semiotic reading of modus ponens. Namely, I will argue that this material implication can be given a semiotic reading. I will argue that this material implication can be replaced by a semiotic statement expressing the relationship, semiotic relationship between the two predicates. It can be replaced by M is an index of C, or C is an icon of M. For what purpose I'm going to do this? The immediate purpose is to answer the question about the status of enthymemes, actually to contribute to the answer to the question, what are enthymemes? Why I'm doing this and why it is a debate among philosophers of logic, or a topic in philosophy of logic. It starts with something that Wilfrid Sellars said. He said that it is received dogma that the reasoning of this kind, it is raining, therefore the streets will be wet. Can you see my board? Okay, it is raining, the streets, therefore the streets will be wet. Sellars says that it is a received dogma that this is an enthymeme, and therefore that it is not complete, that it is invalid if it is presented in this form. That this reasoning is an abridged version of it is raining. Whenever it rains, the streets will be wet. Therefore, the streets will be wet. Sellars said that in one less known paper from less known in comparison to his other papers, paper Inference and Meaning from 1953. And there he attempted to introduce some kind of material rules of inference, claiming that actually this form, which seems to be incomplete, is absolutely complete, even valid, and that the consequence, the streets will be wet, follows not by the rule of logic, by some logical rule of inference from it is raining, but by some kind of material rule of inference. Later, Robert Brandom tried to contribute to this topic, and Robert Brandom tried to develop this notion of material rules of inference from Sellars. And he introduced some validity, which he calls material correctness. Actually, he says, he talks about material correctness, but essentially he compares material correctness, i.e. material validity, with logical validity. And he argues that material validity, which is a kind of validity, which is characteristic for such inferences. For example, Sellars' example, it is raining, therefore the streets will be wet. Robert Brandom would claim that this reasoning is materially valid, and what is important in Brandon's arguments is the fact that he is taking material validity as being as formally valid as logical validity. He does that by defining validity through formal validity through by relying on the notion of the fixed vocabulary. And he says, for example, if we have an inference, Ivo Andrić is a writer. If an X is a writer, then he is an artist. Therefore, Ivo Andrić is an artist. Here, this inference is valid due to its logical vocabulary, which means due to the meaning of the expression if then. And this expression is fixed in the sense that everything else we can replace by some rules of substitution. And we can say whatever we want. We can say Ivo Andrić is a painter. If an X is a painter, then he is an artist. Ivo Andrić is an artist, or we can even change artist. We can add whatever we want, and a normal story. But Brandon claims that we can, if we look at this argument, Ivo Andrić is a writer, Ivo Andrić is an artist, then we can see that we can fix is a writer, is an artist, and we can change and replace Ivo Andrić with William Shakespeare, Faulkner, Picasso, or any other name. So, and the idea of Brandon is that it's actually very important to accept such inferences as being primitively valid or materially valid, because through embracing such inferences, we are actually learning the meanings of non-logical vocabulary. So the point is that by grasping the inferences with the fixed logical vocabulary, we learn the meanings of logical terms by grasping by endorsing, accepting inferences of this kind, which means with the fixed non-logical vocabulary, we grasp non-logical terms. And he calls it material validity, and he says it is also valid good due to its form, because the form is given by the structure, and the structure is given by this fixed vocabulary, which is not open to substitution. Robert Brandon makes these attempts in many papers and books. The most, maybe the first important is his book, Making It Explicit. And in the very title of the book, his main idea is expressed. That book is from 1994. And his idea is that if we have an ordinary modus ponens P, if P then Q, therefore Q, there is no room for this implication if P then Q in this inference, simply because Brandon says, first, our language need not be rich enough to contain the conditional, the expressions for conditionals. And then the function of the conditional, if we have the language, a language rich enough, is to make this reasoning from P to Q explicit, which means that the action comes before before theory. The praxis is before theory, and if P, then Q is a part of theory. So, so the main argument of Brandom's is that the conditional is actually something that comes after the reasoning, and it may pass centuries or more before we have a language rich enough to express, to make explicit what we actually already did many times implicitly. So the main problem, which is seen by Brandom, is the question of the status of this implication, actually of the conditional. It is interesting to mention how Gilbert Ryle also addressed this problem. He introduced the notion, a notion of inference ticket, because he was also thinking, of course, before Brandom and before Sellers, obviously, we can find that in his the concept of mind. His idea is that to put if P then Q as a premise of this argument amounts to a categorical mistake. His reason for such a claim is based on his understanding on what Lewis Carroll did in his famous paper, in which he explained by creating a paradox that the rules of inference cannot be treated as premises in the argument. So, and it is well-known argument, and it goes as follows. Lewis Carroll says, if we have P and if we have P then Q, and we use modus ponens to infer Q, then we cannot, if we want to put a rule of inference as a premise, then we will put this modus ponens as another premise, and here the regress, infinite regress begins, which means that the conclusion could not be reached. So, and what is the difference, and what is Ryle's understanding is that this regress begins already here with this if P then Q. Namely, Ryle sees and understands if P then Q as a kind of license to make a transition from P to Q, and he thinks that as a license, it is a kind of ticket, like a normal ticket for traveling from one place to another. And this ticket is not a part of a journey, says Ryle. It is just a kind of license, a permit for passing from traveling from one city to another. So he also, by analogy, says when we know if P then Q, when we know the conditional, what we know that we can pass from P to Q, and there is no room for this conditional among premises, simply because a ticket cannot be a part of this inferential journey. That's why he calls it inference ticket. He calls it inference ticket because, of course, when you say if P then Q, it cannot be universal. It cannot be rule in the same sense as modus ponens is a rule, but it doesn't bother Ryle. He says, of course, permits should not be universal at all, because if they are universal, then they are not permits. Permits should make constraints. So I just illustrated how this discussion against this status of obviously logically invalid arguments, how this discussion goes, and it threatens the very concept of enthymemes. And what I see as a common point among Sellers, Brandom, and Ryle is that they kind of also share one dogmatic belief, one dogma, that an enthymeme as seen as an invalid inference is logically useless. And it is really not true, because in one famous paper, again, I think that because in that paper, Anderson and Belknap in 1961, kind of philosophically represent their idea of relevant implication, and they use the concept of enthymeme to argue against material implication and against strict implication, to introduce the need for some other implication, namely relevant implication. How they argue? They say we have a major premise, a minor premise, and conclusion. They say all bodies moving in elliptic orbits are subject to the law of gravitation. Minor is comets move in elliptic orbits. Therefore, the conclusion is comets are subject to the law of gravitation. They say that if we have a valid argument, then there is a feeling or opinion or a belief that there should be some corresponding true proposition. And it is natural to assume that this true proposition would be in the form of a conditional, in the form of if major and minor, then conclusion. And they ask the question, what would be the adequate implication behind this verb form, if then? Word form is, sorry. And they argue as this. Let us assume that it is a material implication. And let us assume that minor premise is true. But then we have a conjunction. If one conjunct is true, then it is suppressible. And then we have if major, then conclusion. And then by this equivalence, we have that from a major premise, we infer the conclusion. And they say, if we take material implication, we will get the result that an enthymeme is a valid inference. So, and that is absurd. The same strategy they apply for strict implication, and the same happens simply because if necessarily major and minor, then necessarily conclusion, and then we again have that an enthymeme, an enthymeme is a valid argument, and therefore they say some other kind of implication is needed. Of course, this is not my topic. but what I want to point out here is that there is no reason to save the validity of incomplete arguments because their logical value can be seen from arguments of this kind as are given by Anderson and Bellner. Another worry, another point, another common point among Sellers, Brandon, and Ryle is something I'm arguing now. I'm starting my argument against that point. It seems that they assume that if a conditional is not present as expressed by an implication, it means for them, as I understand the consequences of their claims, that it is not present at all. I'm going to argue that the conditional relevant for the modus ponens when it is not present in the form of some kind of implication, it can be present as a semiotic statement about the relationship between the two predicates. And now, since I discussed antonyms, it is necessary to turn to Aristotle and his definition of antonyms. It is well known again that Aristotle introduced the term antonym in philosophical discourse, and many philosophers, maybe logicians, assume that Aristotle defined an antonym as an incomplete argument, simply because it is usually, and even Anderson and Belknap assume that an antonym is an incomplete argument. And that's, I'm not arguing against that. It's completely okay to have that meaning of an antonym. But what is important for my purpose is that historians of philosophy rightly notice that Aristotle did not define antonym as an incomplete argument. Actually, Aristotle defined an antonym as an inference from probabilities and signs. And Aristotle does not, it is in prior analytics, and Aristotle does not give examples of inferences from probabilities in this context. He gives 3 examples for inferences from signs, which means I can say that I can phrase it that Aristotle actually defined antonyms as semiotic inferences. And Aristotle says how a sign may be taken in 3 ways corresponding to the position of the middle term in the figures. It can be taken as the middle term in the first figure, the middle term in the second figure, and in the middle term in the third figure. But you can see from these examples that Aristotle actually gave incomplete versions of these arguments. I will return to this point now. I have to hurry to finish my talk to come to the conclusion before the time is gone. I don't know. These are his examples. This woman has milk. This woman is with child. This woman is pale. this woman is with child, therefore is with child. Pitakos is good, therefore wise men are good. So now completed forms of these inferences are: this woman has milk. Having milk means pregnancy or being with child. Therefore, this woman is with child. The second figure, this woman is pale. Paleness is a characteristic of pregnancy or being with child. This woman is with child. The third, Pitakos is good. Pitakos is wise. Wise men are good. Middle terms are milk, milk. Middle terms appear in both premises, but not in the conclusion. Pale, pale, and Pitakos, Pitakos. When we write these inferences formally, they appear in this way. I argued for these readings of these examples elsewhere, and I can only briefly say if M is milk, A is M, for any X that is M, then it follows that it is C, therefore A is C. Here we have, so you can see A is P, if X is C, then X is P, A is C, and if C is with child, P is paleness, and A, small a is Pitakos, G is good, W is wise. So if A is G, A is W, we have that all wise men are good. What we can see here is that only the first example, when completed, is deductively logically valid. The second and the third example, when completed, are even as completed, invalid. So now, so what I'm going to do now, this was a discussion about enthymemes as inferences through science. And it is natural and almost necessary, if you want to understand what is going on in these examples, to use some of Peirce's semiotics. And it is natural to try to see whether it is in some way useful for understanding Aristotle. Actually, it would be the other way around. Aristotle would be useful for understanding Peirce. But first, Peirce did not rely on Aristotle when he was discussing his theory of science, his semiotics, but he relied on Aristotle when he was discussing three kinds of reasoning: deduction, abduction, induction. And Peirce showed he correlated deduction with the first figure, abduction with the second figure, induction with the third figure. So it is natural to try to see what is happening in Aristotle's examples. And somehow we are led to see that this is deduction, this is the second one is abduction, and the third one is induction. Then another question, which I termed Peirce's dilemma. It is the dilemma that Peirce posed, but he didn't solve it. We who read Peirce, we want to see what is going on there, because I think it is very important to solve this question, and you will see why I think that. The dilemma is Peirce wanted to relate deduction, abduction, and induction to his theory of science, to symbol, icon, and index. It is the main division. Symbol is a sign that signifies due to some convention, icon due to some similarity with the object the sign refers to, and index refers to its object by some real existential relationship among them. So The first early view of Peirce was that deduction proceeds through symbol, abduction through icon, and induction through index. The second view was that deduction proceeds through index, abduction through icon, and induction through symbol. So which one is right? As I said, at another place in detail, I'm solving and analyzing this dilemma, but I can briefly say that I was led by something I saw in Aristotle's text. And I repeat again that in this context, Peirce did not refer to Aristotle. So there are 3 points, 3 observations I am going to make. We saw that in our examples, the first example of Aristotle was deductively valid. The second and the third were invalid. It corresponds to deduction, abduction, induction. Aristotle also says that the sign which is appearing in the first figure is irrefutable, while the signs appearing in the second and the third figure are refutable. And moreover, Aristotle says that it would be good to call the sign which appears in the first figure an index. So the starting point was to see whether it is plausible to read deduction as being the reasoning through index. So, the way I solve Peirce's dilemma is that in the first figure, in his first example of science, and the missing premise should be read M is an index of C. In the second example, the missing premise should be read P is an icon of C. And the third example was the most difficult to adjust to some natural understanding of what is going on in semiotic relationships. It is the question, what Pittacus is a sign for? And the answer is pretty obvious. Pittacus is a sign for Pittacus. It is a name that is introduced by convention, and it is introduced to symbolize, to refer, to signify that person, Pittacus. So, in conclusion, what was the issue I was dealing with in this paper was this inference. A is M. If X is M, then X is C. Therefore, A is C. And but for the readings of this implication, the analysis of the second example of Aristotle's is important because we see here that the consequence is read as P is an icon of C. And when we apply our analysis to the case we are dealing with, we have that this material implication from modus ponens in predicate logic can be read semiotically as M is an index of C or C is an icon of M. So to return to the main question, what happens with the reasoning from A is M to A is C? What is missing here? Ryle, Brandom, Sellers would say nothing is missing here. I disagree, and I think that it is true, and I agree with that, that our language could not be rich enough to contain an instrument for expressing conditionals, but it does not mean conditionals in the form of implications, but it does not mean that the content of that conditional is not present in this reasoning, for it may be present in some more basic form as a semiotic relationship between those predicates. We can put either M is an index of C or C is an icon of M. And I will end with saying it may, this semiotic relationship may not even be said, but in a sense, it can be seen. So that's the end.